Okay, so today I'm joined by Mr. Tony Spencer, a photographer who knows no boundaries and someone who I sense from his photographs enjoys a bit of danger as he travels place to place where few have been with a camera. He also leads workshops with light and land, but also for his own company, Antony Spencer Photography. So welcome, Tony. How are you?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm doing really good. How are you doing?
I'm not bad, considering. Weird times at the moment.
Yeah, very weird times for sure.
But we keep ourselves busy. So I guess the first question I'm going to ask is, where did it all start? How did it start for you in photography?
It started for me really. I just wanted to take pictures of my kids. So wound up getting, my dad was going to Hong Kong, wound up with him coming back with an original Canon 5D and a
Nice.
massive 28-300 white lens, which was crazy expensive and not very good at all. But yeah, it was so cheap from Hong Kong at the time. I was able to sort of part exchange that in and get a bunch of lenses that I wanted, and just quickly discovered all the local sort of landscape photographers around, people like David Noten and Charlie Waite, and just so many people in Dorset. Became really inspired, and landscapes just took over quite quickly for me.
That was where it all began for you. I guess you live down in Dorset anyway, so you're in a nice area for landscape photography.
Yeah, down in Dorset, so that the coastline and the landscapes down here are pretty special for sure. And I worked sort of all over the southwest, and I was self-employed and traveling around, and could easily just, if the weather looked great, rock up and do a sunrise or a sunset, or even both some days. Depending on the weather and where I was working. So that really helped a lot. So the traveling and sort of being in different locations and able to reach different locations without it costing me a fortune was a big deal. So
fantastic. And I guess things changed in a big way when you got that knock at the door from a certain someone. But before that, you travelled out to Australia, hadn't you?
Yeah, I'd been out to Australia and things didn't work out in Australia, so I wound up back in the UK. But yeah, everything.
Uncertain times.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so obviously photography was a big part of your life, and it was then a moment you got a knock at the door and things changed, I guess, in a sense. Tell us the story, Tony.
Yeah, definitely. I'd been working pretty hard, and I've been sort of getting a few workshops together in Scandinavia predominantly, especially through the winter months. And I'd entered the UK Landscape Photographer of the Year competition and didn't really expect too much. I was just hoping that I'd get a picture in the book. And yeah, one Sunday afternoon, there was just a knock on the door, and Charlie was stood there, and he said, sort of introduced himself like I wouldn't know who he was, which was quite funny. And just, yeah, he said, you've just won Landscape Photographer of the Year, and you'll be receiving £10,000 pretty shortly, and expect lots of publicity. So things really sort of took off from there, really, and everything went a bit crazy.
A lot of people knew your work through social media, so I guess the Aurora shots out in Scandinavia were trending on social media. So how did you find the power of social media for you at that time?
Yeah, it was really huge. There wasn't, obviously, social media was completely different to what it is today. There was no Instagram or no anything. I mean, Flickr was probably the only thing anybody was using in 2010. And I used Flickr a lot, and I think I learned a lot from Flickr and other photographers. I think there's so many amazing photographers around, even then, and everybody was on Flickr. So you'd sort of I had a lot of friends and follow people and keep up with people and learn from what they were doing. So I think social media helped me in lots of ways back then.
So the positive side of social media, the power of it, but then I guess the negative side, that suddenly everyone started doing it, didn't they? And they are still doing it now. It's
Yeah, Instagram in particular, but lots of social media, and the sharing of photographs has really changed. Well, it's changed whole economies for certain parts of the world, for sure. If you look at what's happened to Iceland and the Lofoten Islands in Norway, not that they were always quite valued as tourist destinations anyway, but I think the pictures that photographers were sharing have just made those places and made their tourist economy completely.
And do you feel that people are now shooting more for likes and shares rather than for their own portfolio and for printing because of social media and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook?
It definitely feels that way when you're in places, places that you wouldn't see another photographer now. If you go out to Lofoten and certain places in Iceland, you'd see hundreds of tripods on any one beach at any one time. And it does seem like that's the way it's gone, but everybody's got their own agendas, and how they want to shoot and what they want to shoot for is completely up to them. But
definitely. Like you say, I guess it's trying to find a unique angle on something or go to places where people haven't been, which is becoming more and more difficult, perhaps, because everything is on the internet, so it gives you a preconceived idea of what it already looks like, and it's already kind of inspiring you where you should go. But I guess you yourself, you are going places and doing things that are still quite different. So things like shooting from a helicopter. How did that happen? How did that start?
That happened. I started in Iceland probably about 2009. I think I did my first flight in a Cessna. And I ended up doing a few flights in a Cessna, just inspired by a local Icelandic photographer, Sigurgeir Sigurjonsson. And his work was just incredible. And you could just see the potential, and you could see that, Iceland was so dynamic. It very rarely looked the same twice. And from that first flight that I did, it was actually whilst leading a workshop, we sort of split the costs, and the clients, everybody was sort of up for an adventure to see what would happen. And I was hooked immediately. And yeah, slowly sort of transitioned into using helicopters, which of course are just astronomically more expensive, but really, really worthwhile if you want to take sort of aerial photographs and really be in control of composition, being able to hover and change your elevation to a particular subject just was incredible. And it just gives you so much more control if you can sort of liaise with the pilot properly and take control and just get everything lined up like you'd like. So being in a Cessna is one thing, but flying at sort of 80, 90 knots, nearly 100 miles an hour, just trying to pick out compositions as you go is very, very challenging compared to being in a helicopter.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through your portfolio of work from the helicopter, and like you say, everything is almost completely different. It looks like a different painting each picture. So obviously I've got the print behind me, so the River Delta geese, which is quite a well-known picture of yours, which is that one. Without the geese in it, it would look like almost like a painting, I guess. But
yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, is it? Because it's hard to say, isn't it? It's obviously a river, I guess.
It's a big kind of pool just before the river enters out. So it's like an estuary really at high tide. So the water's covering up what, bars of sand that would otherwise be exposed, and you get this amazing sort of sense of flow under the surface of the water. So it's using a polarizer to cut through the surface glare just to bring out the colors and the textures underneath. And yeah, those geese just flew over at the perfect time really. And it was just one of those moments that you don't get very often at all. And that was actually the first time I flew in a helicopter over Iceland. And I've never seen anything since that sort of comes close to that. But
it's that V formation, isn't it, of the geese? It's special. And what gear do you use to capture them? Is it special lenses you're using, or is it?
No, not really. It's nearly all done. I use a 40 to 80 lens on a phase 1 or a 24 to 70 if I'm shooting with a Sony. So it's a combination of those two setups. And it helps, I normally get every participant using the same kind of focal lengths, and some go up with a long lens as well, but with the vibration of a helicopter, it's good to be relatively wide. Yeah. And also have everybody shooting at the same focal length, so you don't need to spend time taking the helicopter up for somebody shooting with a 400mm and back down for somebody shooting wide. So you just, you make the most of the time, and it's so expensive being in a helicopter anyway that you want to make sure that the time is used as productively as possible. So yeah, I would say 90% of all of my aerials are taken on a sort of 24-70 range lens.
Okay, I guess shutter speed's the crucial part, yeah.
Yeah, shutter speed needs to be really around 1,000th of a second at least. So you're shooting, depending on the weather, you're normally shooting at quite sort of high ISOs and relatively wide open. But the beauty of shooting from a helicopter is you're normally so far away from your subject that you can get away shooting pretty wide open. So f4, f5, 6, something like that.
Okay, that's fair enough. And then coming on to some more adrenaline junkie work, storm chasing.
Yeah,
everyone's dream as a little boy.
Yeah, storm chasing was just something I always wanted to do. So to be able to combine that with photography was just incredible. And it's another thing which has really taken off, I think, over the last 7 or 8 years. And the numbers that you see now when you're out on the plains, the numbers of people, especially with tripods and cameras, has gone absolutely mad. But it's just such a wonderfully photogenic thing to do, you know, when you get on the right storms. And it's not easy. There's a lot of work involved and a lot of travel, but those 2 or 3 storms a trip that you get on that are just perfect, they're just so beautiful to photograph.
And you're traveling distances, aren't you? Like big distances.
Yeah, huge distances. Probably averaging 600 miles of driving a day, but it's, you know, really common to be driving 1,000 miles in a day some days just to get from one storm setup to the next and be in position. So it's very hard work. It's exhausting, but really rewarding when everything comes together and it goes right.
There's one particular shot that caught my eye and actually caught all of our eyes at Fotospeed, so much so we used it on our brochure. It's the shot of, I think there's about 9 lightning bolts coming down, but it's a stitch, I believe. So it's quite a powerful picture. You know what I'm talking? Yeah.
That was just one evening in Nebraska. It had been a really long, difficult day, and the storms we picked up just weren't very interesting. And we were about to give up and just call it a day. And one storm we've been following became severe warned again. So we just decided we'd go for it, and we got back in front and just followed it until sunset. And just as the sort of sunset light started to creep in, the storm just went crazy, really. The structure was fantastic. The light coming through the storm from behind was incredible. And the lightning just went off the chart. So this was a storm that was probably moving at about 35 miles an hour. So you drive and you get in front of the storm and you find a decent position with decent visibility and not too many sort of distracting elements, and just hope that the storm continues to come towards you. And that's exactly what happened that evening. And we managed to get sort of 30 minutes of just shooting as the storm approached with the most incredible lightning and colors. So yeah, it was just a really beautiful evening.
And any close shaves whilst out there chasing storms?
I've had a few, but never with a group. I've sort of been chasing with a couple of friends, and this at times when I sort of haven't had anybody else with me, any sort of meteorologist with me. And yeah, things have become a little bit scary. Just when storms, obviously, when the atmosphere is really insanely volatile, those storms can fire at any time. And I've had a few times where they fired many hours earlier than expected, and that's caught a lot of people off guard. And yeah, driving away from an F5 tornado in the middle of a town that we'd just been sitting eating lunch in, that was a pretty sort of scary day. But normally, you know, when we've got a group, we play everything a lot more safe. And yeah, we've never had any dangerous situations in that environment, really. So we keep it safe and keep our distance. And yeah, to be honest, you want to be away from the storm anyway to get the best photographs. Right underneath the storms is rarely produces the best photographs. So we're at a safe distance, and we keep a safe distance all the time.
And then coming on to some more extreme photography, and that's lava fields. So you went out to Hawaii a couple of years ago now?
Yeah, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago now. Just time flies. But it was a workshop that me and a really good friend of mine who lives in the States, Justin Resnick, we were leading. And we planned it probably 2 or 3 years in advance of the time we actually got out there. So we decided we were going to do a Hawaii workshop, and at the time we planned it, the lava was flowing into the ocean, which is pretty rare, even in Hawaii. And, you know, there's so many pictures when it happens, but it doesn't happen that often at all. And I think within a week of us planning and selling this workshop, the lava stopped flowing into the ocean completely. And it wasn't until about 5 days before our trip went, which was, I think it was nearly 2.5 years between the time we sold it out and actually got to go out there and do the trip. Within a week, just as we were about to do our tour, the lava started making its way back towards the ocean again. So I think that the first day we got out there to photograph the ocean was actually the first day it was really in a photographic sort of place, just entering the ocean, cascading in off of the rocks. So we were incredibly lucky and fortunate. But yeah, that was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. So
how do you go about photographing lava? Obviously, you're out there, you've seen it, you're like, oh my God, that looks amazing. But you need to make sure you get good pictures of it because this doesn't happen that often. So how do you go about capturing the moment?
Yeah, well, I think it was a learning curve for all of us, really. It's such a spectacular thing to see. And I think it just felt like it would be quite easy if the lava was flowing to make these pictures. But the light has to be perfect. The lava is so intense and so colorful and so bright that in darkness, or if it's just too light or too dark, the lava just doesn't pop like you want it to. So, and being in Hawaii, you're relatively close to the equator, so the light doesn't last long at all. And I think you probably get a 5 or 10 minute window every sort of sunrise or sunset, just as the sort of ambient light levels balance with the brightness of the lava. And you just want the lava to sort of pop and to give you that color, but not to, if it's too dark, the lava's just so bright, you end up bracketing like crazy and it's so hard to put the picture back together. And if it's, if you're in full sunlight, the sunlight just seems to sort of wash the lava out. So there's just a small window every day where everything sort of comes together.
I guess it's as close as you can get going back millions of years, isn't it, almost? It always seems sort of Jurassic.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was just nature at its finest. I don't think there's anything more spectacular you can see. And yeah, I was just really fortunate to have that experience. And it's not something I think I'll probably get to see again. So it's not something you can chase unless you're in a position to just jump on a plane and fly to Hawaii the next time that happens, which of course couldn't happen at the moment anyway. But yeah, it's I was really lucky, and it was an incredible thing to see and experience and photograph. And yeah, just over the moon with the experience and some of the pictures that I managed to create.
Yeah, some amazing pictures. Yeah, beautiful. And then obviously you're known as a landscape photographer, but actually looking at your portfolio and your new website, you've got some amazing wildlife pictures. So Tony Spencer, the wildlife photographer as well.
Yeah, no, it's more capitalizing on any wildlife we see, during some of the trips that we do, but spending time in the high Arctic in particular, with polar bears and walrus and whales and that kind of level of wildlife all around is pretty incredible. I've done a couple of trips to Africa too, which they've been great fun. I kind of enjoy putting any of that wildlife in a landscape, but every now and then something sort of happens where the wildlife becomes a star, and I just try and take pictures of anything that's photogenic that's in front of me. So yeah, there's a few pictures from Africa that I'm happy with, and also places like Yellowstone and some of which are also landscape locations, but sometimes the wildlife's just so amazing you have to stop and take pictures. And yeah, so some of the pictures from there have really worked as well.
I guess the one that springs to mind is the polar bear. I love the polar bear shot. So I'm looking at the picture. I'm guessing you're fairly close to it.
The big polar bear on the ice floe. Yeah, for sure. So that polar bear, I think we were in the pack ice. We were about 83 degrees north on a ship with a small group. And we've been looking for polar bears all day, and there wasn't a sniff. There was like a polar bear track here and there, but the ice had broken up quite significantly. So we that whole day we teamed polar bears the days before, and that was our last day in the pack ice. So we decided just to break the monotony of searching for polar bears up to get the whole group off and do a group photograph on a big ice floe. So we found this nice big piece of ice that was secure enough, and we sort of took the Zodiacs out and ramped them onto the ice. Everybody got off, and we were just taking a group photograph, and all of a sudden this paw just appeared on the ice, and that massive polar bear had obviously been swimming across to us, so it knew we were there, even though we hadn't seen it at all. And very, very quickly we had to get back in the Zodiacs and just get back on the water. And as we did that, that bear just turned and started charging for one of the Zodiacs, it still had a lot of ground to cover, and we did get away relatively safely, but it was very, very close. And yeah, just another one of those experiences, really, which is, I don't think I'll ever see anything quite like that again. I mean, when the polar bear realized it couldn't quite get to us, because it was properly hunting us, it just decided to stand and pose and sniff and just look around at the two Zodiacs that we had. So we were able to photograph it for about half an hour, but my legs were like jelly after that, because that polar bear really was charging for the Zodiac that I was in. So yeah, just spent the whole time taking pictures of one of the most incredible animals on the planet, just knowing that 5-10 seconds more would have made a big difference to the outcome of that day, really.
So would it be fair to say that you seem to attract danger on some of these?
I think it'd be fair to say that you've jumped straight to the dangerous situations and stories that we can talk about. But yeah, no, very few things like that happen, really. But the ones that do tend to be sort of the most photogenic moments and produce the most crazy images. So
definitely. Fantastic. And then coming on to, I guess, favourite places. Where would you say is your favourite place to shoot on planet?
Storm chasing, for sure, just because it's so unique and you never quite know what you're going to get. And and any of the aerial experiences as well. Greenland, I think for me at the moment is probably my favourite place on Earth, and it's just so unexplored. And I was lucky enough to do a big trip with Joe Cornish last year, which went exceptionally well. And as a result of that, we're putting more and more together. And at the same time last year, I got to fly over the ice cap as well and see the sort of melt water pools and the rivers, and try to make some photographs of that. That was pretty challenging last year because I ended up with, my back was just absolutely destroyed. So I was in agony the whole time, and I didn't really get to capitalize on the time that I had. So hopefully in July, should all these restrictions be lifted and it be safe to travel, I'll get the chance to do that again and hopefully do that properly. But just Greenland in general is very unexplored, with the exception of probably Ilulissat and the Disco Bay area, where all the the icebergs are on the west coast. I think the East Coast in particular is just incredible, and there's amazing locations we found that I don't think any sort of civilians had ever been before. So other than the odd Greenlandic explorer or hunter, we were probably the first people outside of Greenland to step foot in some of these areas and some of the fjords. So yeah, it was incredible to see locations that would never have been photographed before. Which is so rare in this day and age, I guess, isn't it? It's really rare, yeah. You have to work really hard, and a lot of planning and effort goes into trips like that. So yeah, it's making that trip happen was just insanely photogenic. It was just an amazing experience, and we've got another one coming up in a couple of years on the west coast, going to more areas in the far north of Greenland, northwest Greenland. So that's going to be pretty amazing too. So there's just lots of things to be excited about, but lots of unknown. So it's a bit of a gamble, but I think people love being part of a gamble like that and just exploring places that have never been visited and never been photographed. So that's what I'm trying to do more and more now. And it'd be nice to talk about printing as well. I mean, for you, how important is printing as part of your workflow as a photographer? Printing's always been massive to me. I go through spells of printing a lot and then not printing very much, and I think that probably comes down to time more than anything. But over the last few weeks, just having time to get some processing done and finally really catch up on a lot of the images that I've been making over the last few years, and to get some prints done has been incredible. So that's pretty much all I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. Is I've got a big Canon Pro 4000 printer and a bunch of your lovely papers to get through. So yeah, I'm just experimenting and printing a lot of the images that I probably, would have taken another few years to get around to. So I always feel like I need to catch up with the printing and get back on top of everything, but to really have time to sit down and actually catch up is pretty rare. So yeah, the last few weeks have been amazing, and it looks like there'll be a few weeks more to do that. So yeah, I'm quite excited to get through some more printing.
I guess you can't really beat the power of print. I mean, obviously a picture looks lovely on an LED screen, but when you print it, you get the wow factor. I mean, so much so that I've been on print workshops where we've ran prints off and the clients have actually burst into tears, and not in a bad way. I mean, they're holding their print in their hand and they're in bits going, wow, this is my work. This is incredible. You don't get that from a digital file. You only get that from the print.
Yeah, no, there's something incredible about the sort of tangible final photograph, isn't there? The printed photograph. So yeah, having a collection of prints that you've printed and files that that you've worked on to, you've got everything perfect and can be saved as the proper print files. I just think that getting everything arranged like that is amazing. And yeah, having prints is a really powerful thing, I think, and just to have and be able to enjoy and sit down and go through or analyze and reprint even, the whole process of making mistakes and experimenting and being creative. And it's another never-ending learning experience, isn't it? And coupled with the processing, which I've always loved, but again, never really find enough time to go right back through all of the images that I've made over the last 10 years. And I'm seriously going back 10 years and finding pictures that I can't believe I didn't process or print at the time, and finding those now and going through and actually, coming out with a photograph and a printed photograph is just amazing.
So Tony, you've just moved to the Canon Pro 4000, which is obviously a 44-inch printer. You had a 24-inch printer before. How are you finding that new printer? Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I love the new printer. It prints a bit quicker, I think, than my very old Epson. And it seems more economic with ink. And yeah, it was a good step up. I've needed to print bigger files for a long time and make bigger prints. So rather than having to outsource them, it's really nice to be able to be in control of the whole process at home and, get every print looking exactly like I want it to before I ship it out. So yeah, it's been great having that extra size.
Definitely. I mean, obviously you shoot phase, you shoot Sony A7R series and the A9 as well. So they're huge resolution files. A lot of people have these cameras and are printing 6x4s, they're tiny prints. I guess it kind of makes sense to print them bigger so you can see the true quality of the files. You said that's a fair point?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think especially if you're shooting with phase 1 or an A7R 3 or 4, you've got so much resolution, and you can print those images colossal, really. So it's fantastic to see the fine detail and really get in and examine a print for detail when they are printed big enough, for the resolution that you're shooting in.
Definitely. And paper types, you obviously use a couple from our range at Fotospeed. So is it the platinum etching and the smooth cotton?
Yeah, I think they're my two favorites, and I think they do everything I need. I love smooth cotton for the kind of more detailed pictures. I think it's just fantastic with the smooth edge, but there's something about platinum etching that I love as well for a lot of, some of the more subtle images or images that are more about tones. I just think having the texture on the paper just really works for me. So yeah, it's a combination of the two. They're the only two papers I'm using at the moment. So
would you say it's fair to say obviously using matte papers works well for your style of work, matte art papers?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely say that. And I think that if you can print on matte paper, you can print on anything. And I think just sort of rocking up and printing on a glossy or semi-glossy paper is easy, because you're basically replicating the dynamic range of a screen. And, I just think it pushes you to learn more pushing on matte paper. So yeah, it's something that I really enjoy doing.
And who would you say are your inspirations in photography?
My inspirations in photography, I think Joe Cornish would be my number one inspiration, certainly over the last sort of 5 or so years. And initially it was probably photographers that were making sort of very punchier images. I mean, I've always loved Charlie's work as well. I think Charlie's just an incredible photographer, Charlie Waite. But initially, I think I was drawn to people that were photographing sunsets and sunrises. I think the drama of that sort of really pulled me into photography. But now I think I look at people that are doing images, much more subtly. And I think Joe is just the master of subtlety and his printing techniques. Joe's just taught me so much over the last few years. And to be able to work with Joe has just been a dream for me, because I learn so much every time. Even now, just working with people like Joe is incredible. But Charlie Waite also, I think, has incredible prints. Charlie Kramer, I love, and I've got a print behind my head now. One of my my favorite image ever. But there's just so many photographers that are capable of making outstanding images. Total amateur photographers as well. I think so many people know what they're doing, and people can make outstanding images all the time. So it's more kind of favorite images for me from a variety of different people rather than those kind of masters. I think there's just pictures all over the place that are incredible.
Definitely. And what's next for Tony Spencer? I mean, me and Joe, when we're doing the workshops with you, are always saying, when's the book coming out? When's the exhibition? And next year. When's it happening? When's it going to happen?
Yeah, next year. I don't know. It's something. In fact, just speaking to Joe a few weeks ago, he was insistent that I should use this time to get on top of a book and everything else. But I never feel like the collection of images are big enough or good enough yet. So it's always something that I just feel like I need to put off until I'm absolutely happy with everything that I've got. So
you're very critical of your own work, but your portfolio is amazing. It really is. There's so much depth to it. Honestly, you could quite easily have an exhibition, right?
Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. But yeah, it will happen one day, I hope. But I'm not in any rush for that to happen at the minute. So.
Okay, and finally, is there anywhere else you want to go to that you haven't been yet?
There's hundreds of places that I want to go that I haven't yet, but I'm sort of happy with the locations that I'm doing at the minute. And, I've been repeating a few trips that I think are sort of coming to the end of a cycle for me. Places like Namibia or just lots of various different places. So working on new trips to Greenland and new ways to explore the Arctic, the high Arctic. That's what really interests me at the moment, and just getting away from what other people are doing as much as possible. So yeah, that's my aim, is to spend much more time sort of around Spitsbergen and Greenland in particular, Arctic Canada, which there's a couple sort of really high Arctic adventures in Canada that I'm looking to put together, and probably along the Russian coastline as well, North Russian coastline.
Good stuff. Exciting things lined up then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just gotta hope that everything gets back to normal as soon as possible, really.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate your time so much, Tony, today. It means a lot. And look after yourself.
Yep, thank you very much. And same to you.
Yeah, thank you. And keep printing.
I will do, for sure.